Rebecca Anderson adjusted her Navy cap as she observed her reflection in the mirror of the women's restroom at the San Diego Naval Base. At 28, she was one of the youngest lieutenants serving in the Naval Engineering Division, an achievement that had cost her years of intense study, rigorous training, and an unwavering determination that had accompanied her since childhood in a small town in Maine. The navy blue uniform hugged her slender figure with military precision. The gold insignia on her shoulder reflected not only her rank, but the arduous path she had traveled to get there. Rebecca ran a hand through her dark brown hair, which was tied in an impeccable bun under her cap. She took a deep breath, adjusted her posture as she had been trained to do since the academy, and set off for another day of service. The base was bustling with the usual activity of a Friday. Sailors and officers hurried across the central courtyard, while the California sun beat down on the asphalt. Rebecca walked with her posture straight, her gaze fixed ahead, as protocol dictated. Her destination was the main hangar, where she would oversee the installation of new propulsion systems on the USS Hamilton, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer undergoing modernization. "Good morning, Lieutenant Anderson," greeted Sub-Officer Torres, his direct assistant, handing him a clipboard with preliminary. "Captain Ramirez requested your presence at the 0900 meeting." "Thank you, Torres. Any news on the parts we ordered from Northrop?" "They arrived this morning, ma'am. They are already being inspected by the basement team." Rebecca nodded, leafing through the reports as they walked toward the immense hangar. The smell of motor oil, metal, and salt water was a familiar combination that she secretly loved. It was the smell of purpose, of serving something greater than herself. As they walked through the busy shipyard, Rebecca noticed a group of civilians being led by a public relations officer, probably another visit from politicians or executives from companies contracted by the government. She returned her attention to the reports, making notes in the margins with her blue ink pen. The meeting with Captain Ramirez was productive, as always. The 50-year-old man, with gray hair and more than 3 decades of service, respected Rebecca's technical competence, something she greatly appreciated. When she presented her solution to the overheating problem of the new propulsion systems, he simply smiled and said, "That's why you're the best engineer we have, Anderson." At noon, Rebecca decided to use her break to have lunch at the restaurant near the base. The Anchor was a popular establishment among military personnel and civilians working in the area, offering simple but comforting dishes. She removed her cap upon entering, choosing a corner table that gave her a view of the door and windows, a habit she had developed during her training. The restaurant was full, as was typical at that time of day. Sailors, officers, and civilian workers filled the space with lively conversations and occasional laughter. Rebecca ordered a tuna salad and an iced tea, then opened her tablet to review some work emails while she waited. That's when the atmosphere changed. A noisy group of young people entered. 5 guys who looked to be in their early 20s, wearing designer t-shirts, shorts, and expensive sunglasses. They spoke loudly, laughed excessively, and occupied a central table as if they owned the place. Rebecca didn't pay much attention, concentrating on her meal which had just arrived. After a few minutes, however, it became impossible to ignore the group's behavior, especially that of one of them, a young blonde man with broad shoulders and a square jaw, who seemed to be the leader. "Hey, waitress! More beer!" he shouted, snapping his fingers at the young employee who was serving other tables. "And bring it properly this time. The last one was too warm." The waitress, a young Hispanic woman no more than 20 years old, bit her lower lip and nodded, hurrying to fulfill the order. Rebecca watched the scene with silent disapproval, but continued eating her salad, determined not to let the other person's behavior ruin her brief moment of rest. The situation worsened when a first-class sailor, wearing his white service uniform, entered the establishment. The young man was clearly new to the Navy, perhaps fresh out of basic training, judging by his still somewhat insecure posture and extremely short haircut. "Look, everyone, it's one of our brave freshwater sailors," the blonde boy teased, provoking laughter from his companion. The sailor did his best to ignore them, heading to the counter to place his takeout order. Rebecca felt her stomach churn. As an officer, she was responsible for the well-being of the sailors under her command, and although this young man was probably not from her division, the unwritten code of the Navy meant he was part of the same family. He decided to continue ignoring the situation, hoping that the group would soon tire or that the sailor would take his order and leave quickly. Neither happened. "Hey, you?" The blonde boy stood up, walking towards the sailor. "How long did it take you to learn how to fold your clothes properly? Mother Government must be very proud." The sailor was visibly tense, but kept his eyes fixed ahead, following his training to avoid conflicts with civilians. "I'm talking to you, little toy soldier," the boy continued, now only a few steps away from the sailor. "My father pays for your benefits with his taxes, you know? The least you could do is answer when I talk to you." Rebecca slowly closed the tablet. The situation was escalating unnecessarily, and she could see the restaurant manager watching nervously from across the room, probably trying to decide whether to intervene. "Leave him alone," said a female voice from another table. It was a middle-aged woman, dining with what appeared to be her husband. "He's just trying to get his lunch." The blonde boy turned to the woman with a mocking smile. "Ah, look at that. We found a defender of our heroes who play video games on boats all day." His friends laughed loudly, drawing even more attention to the scene. The entire restaurant was now silent, watching the situation unfold. That's when the boy decided to take it a step further. He approached the sailor and gave him a light nudge on the shoulder. "So, cat got your tongue? Or do you only speak when a superior orders you to?" Rebecca stood up silently. She left a few dollars on the table to cover her meal and walked calmly toward the sea. Her firm steps echoed on the wooden floor of the restaurant, now completely silent. "Excuse me," she said in a calm but authoritative tone, positioning herself between the boy and the sailor. The arrogant young man looked her up and down, clearly assessing the woman of average height before him. The Navy officer's uniform seemed to startle him for a moment, but he quickly regained his confident posture. "Oh, look! The Navy sent reinforcement," he said, provoking nervous giggles from his friends. "What's wrong, darling? Did you come to defend your boyfriend's honor?" Rebecca maintained a neutral expression, but her blue-gray eyes were as cold as steel. "I am Lieutenant Rebecca Anderson, a United States naval engineer. This sailor is under my protection as a senior officer. I suggest that you and your friends return to your table, finish your lunch in silence, and leave this establishment." The boy seemed genuinely surprised by the calm and firmness in her voice. For a moment, he hesitated, but then he looked at his friends, who were watching expectantly, and his ego got the better of him. Wow, a little woman giving orders. What happened to the Navy? It's not what it used to be in my grandfather's time, that's for sure. He stepped forward, invading Rebecca's personal space. "And what if I don't want to go back to my desk?" Rebecca didn't back down an inch. Her gaze remained fixed on the young man's eyes, a technique she had learned at the academy to deal with intimidation. "Then I will be obliged to report your conduct to the appropriate authorities. Harassment of military personnel on duty is an offense that can result in federal charges." Her tone was so calm and factual that it seemed she was simply reporting on the weather, but her words had a visible effect on the group. Some of the young man's friends shifted uncomfortably in their seat. "Are you threatening me?" The boy's tone rose an octave, his face beginning to turn red. "No, sir. I'm merely informing you of the legal consequences of your actions. As an American citizen, you have every right to know the laws that protect you and those that limit your behavior in society." Rebecca paused briefly. "Now, for the last time, I ask that you return to your table or leave the establishment." The boy looked around, realizing he now had everyone's attention in the restaurant. Some customers had their phones in hand, probably recording this. "You don't know who you're talking to," he whispered through gritted teeth. "My father is Tyler Harrington, CEO of Harrington Technologies. He supplies equipment to your precious Navy." Rebecca raised an eyebrow slightly. "Interesting. I'm quite familiar with Harrington's systems. I'm currently working on implementing the HT-5000 on the USS Hamilton. Excellent technology." Her voice remained professional. "I'm sure your father would be fascinated to know how his son treats the military personnel who use and evaluate your company's products. Should I contact him to discuss this incident?" The young man's face visibly paled. The mention that this officer not only knew his father's work, but was in a position to influence multi-million-dollar contracts seemed to finally pierce his arrogance. "You're bluffing," he murmured, but his tone no longer carried the confidence it once had. "Feel free to check." Lieutenant Rebecca Anderson, Naval Engineering Division, USS Hamilton. She maintained a steady gaze. "Now, what will your decision be?" The silence that followed was almost palpable. After what seemed like an eternity, but was only a few seconds, the boy took a step back, avoiding Rebecca's gaze. "Let's go, guys," he grumbled to his friends. "This place isn't all that great." The group stood up awkward, leaving money on the table and quickly leaving the restaurant. As the door closed behind them, a collective sigh of relief swept through the establishment, followed by spontaneous applause that began at one table and soon spread throughout the restaurant. Rebecca ignored the applause, turning to the young sailor, who now looked at her with a mixture of relief and admiration. "Everything's all right, sailor, double quotes." She glanced at the name on his uniform. "Martinez?" "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you, ma'am," he replied, instantly adopting a formal posture. "Rest, Sailor Martinez. Where are you serving?" "USS Nimitz, ma'am." "I'm a communications technician. I was transferred 2 weeks ago." Rebecca nodded. "Welcome to San Diego, then. The base may seem intimidating at first, but you'll get used to it quickly. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask your officers. We're all in the same boat, literally." She allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you very much, Lieutenant Annan," the young sailor said, looking genuinely moved. Rebecca nodded and was about to leave when the restaurant manager approached. "Lieutenant, your lunch is on the house today. What you did was impressive. Many would have chosen a more aggressive approach." "There's no need, sir. I just did my job." She checked her wristwatch. "I need to get back to base now. Have a good day." As she left the restaurant, putting her cap back on, Rebecca felt the admiring glances that followed her. It wasn't the first time she'd encountered such behavior, and she doubted it would be the last. As one of the few women in her position, she had learned that authority didn't need to be exercised through shouting or physical intimidation. True authority came from knowledge, competence, and the inner strength that naturally radiated from someone who knew exactly their worth and purpose. The rest of the day passed without further incident. Rebecca immersed herself in her work, overseeing the installation of the new systems and resolving technical issues with her team. When her shift finally ended, the sun was already setting on the horizon, painting the San Diego sky with shades of orange and red. Driving back to her modest apartment in Coronado, a small peninsula connected to San Diego by an imposing bridge, Rebecca reflected on the restaurant incident. It wasn't the first time she'd had to defend a subordinate or herself from prejudice and disrespectful behavior, but each occurrence left a bitter taste in her mouth. Her apartment was a perfect reflection of her personality, organized, functional, with personal touches that revealed her passion for books, classical music, and marine photography. The white walls were decorated with black and white photographs of historic ships and stormy oceans, many of them taken by herself during her mission. Rebecca took a quick shower and put on comfortable clothes, a Naval Academy t-shirt and sweatpants. She made herself a cup of chamomile tea and sat on the small balcony overlooking San Diego Bay, where the city lights reflected on the dark water like fallen stars. Her phone rang, displaying the name Mom on the screen. Rebecca smiled and answered promptly. "Hi, Mom. Becky, darling. How's San Diego today?" "It's raining here in Portland as usual." The warm voice of her mother, Eleanor Ann, always brought a sense of comfort that nothing else could. Eleanor was a literature teacher at a high school in Maine, a sweet but strong-willed woman who had raised Rebecca alone after her father, also a Navy officer, died in service when she was only 6 years old. "It's beautiful as always. Sunshine all day. How are you?" The conversation flowed easily between mother and daughter, with Eleanor recounting the latest news from the small town and Rebecca sharing details about her work that weren't confidential. She deliberately omitted the restaurant incident, knowing it would only worry her mother. "And your social life, darling? Have you met anyone interesting?" Rebecca rolled her eyes, smiling. It was a recurring question her mother asked on almost every phone call. "Mom, you know how it is. I'm focused on my career right now. Maybe when things calm down a bit, ... Double quotes. You always say that." Eleanor sighed on the other end of the line. "But remember that life isn't all work. Your father was passionate about the Navy, but he also made time for us. It's important to have balance. I know, Mom. I promise. I'm trying. After hanging up, Rebecca watched the city lights for a few more minutes. Her mother was right, as always. Since joining the academy, her life had become a series of professional goals to achieve, with little room for personal relationships beyond casual friendships or brief romances that never did. The following morning, a typical sunny Saturday in Southern California, Rebecca decided to go for a run on the beach before heading to base for a few hours of work. Running always helped her organize her thoughts and release the stress that had accumulated during the week. The soft sand beneath her feet and the rhythmic sound of the waves crashing on the shore were the perfect setting for an invigorating run. She was focused on her breathing when she spotted a group of people gathered at one point on the beach. There seemed to be some commotion. Curious, Rebecca slowed down and approached the group. What she saw immediately put her into action mode. A middle-aged man was lying on the sand, apparently unconscious, while a woman was desperately trying to communicate something to other beachgoers, but there seemed to be a language barrier. "Excuse me," said Rebecca, pushing her way through the onlookers. "I'm trained in first aid." The woman, who appeared to be the fallen man's wife or companion, looked at Rebecca with evident relief in her eyes. She spoke rapidly in Spanish, gesturing towards the man. "He has a heart problem," she managed to say in broken English. "Medication. He forgot to take it." Rebecca knelt beside the man, checking his vital signs. Weak and irregular pulse, shallow breathing. She positioned him in the recovery position and instructed someone from the crowd to call emergency services. "Does anyone here speak fluent Spanish?" he asked the group. A young man stepped forward. "I can speak. Can I help? Please ask her what his exact medical condition is and what medication he should have taken." After a brief conversation, the young man translated, "He has cardiac arrhythmia. The medication is a beta blocker called metoprolol." Rebecca nodded, remaining calm. "Ask how long he's been off his medication and if he has any other medical conditions." While they waited for the ambulance, Rebecca continued monitoring the man's vital signs and keeping him in the correct position. The surrounding crowd watched in respectful silence, impressed by the efficiency and calmness of the athletic woman in running clothes who had taken control of the situation. When the paramedics finally arrived, Rebecca relayed all the information she had managed to gather. They praised her for handling the situation correctly. "Are you a doctor?" one of the paramedics asked as they prepared the man for transport. "No, I'm a Navy officer. We have extensive first aid training." The patient's wife held Rebecca's hands tightly, tears in her eyes. Thank you, she repeated. "God sent you to us today." Rebecca smiled gently. "You're welcome. I hope he recovers soon." As she watched the ambulance drive away, Rebecca felt a familiar sense of satisfaction at being able to help. This was why she had joined the Navy. To serve, to make a difference, even in small ways. Every day, he continued his run, now with a renewed purpose. Upon arriving at the base a few hours later, he was greeted by looks and smiles that were different from usual. "Good morning, Lieutenant Anderson," greeted the guard at the entrance, with a wider smile than usual. On her way to her office, she noticed that many sailors and officers greeted her with a respect that seemed to go beyond usual protocol. Intrigued, she entered her room to find Petty Officer Torres waiting for her with a knowing smile. "It seems the lieutenant has become a local celebrity," he remarked, handing her a tablet. On the screen, Rebecca saw a video showing her interaction with the arrogant young man at the restaurant the previous day. Apparently, someone had recorded an entire incident and posted it on social media, where it quickly went viral. "Oh, no," Rebecca murmured, watching herself calmly and with dignity confront the young man. The video already had millions of views and thousands of comments, most praising her composure and the way she had defended the young sailor without resorting to confrontation or aggression. "The entire base is talking about it," Torres continued, "and not just the base. It even appeared on the local news this morning." Rebecca returned the tablet, feeling uncomfortable with the attention. It wasn't a big deal. Any officer would have done the same. Torres smiled, perhaps, but the way the lieutenant handled the situation ... was impressive. "That young man is Connor Harrington, son of the CEO of Harrington Technologies. He has a reputation for being a troublemaker, always using his father's influence to get out of trouble. Rebecca sighed, remembering the name the young man had mentioned. Well, I hope this doesn't cause any problems with the Navy's contracts with Harrington. On the contrary, it seems that Tyler Harrington himself called Captain Ramirez this morning. He wants to meet with the lieutenant personally to apologize for his son's behavior. Rebecca raised her eyebrows, genuinely surprised. She hadn't expected that kind of reaction. The captain asked me to inform you that Mr. Harrington will be here at 2 p.m. He would like the lieutenant to be present at the meeting. Understood, Rebecca replied, turning her attention back to the reports on her desk, trying to ignore the strange feeling of being the center of attention. Right on time at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Rebecca entered the meeting room where Captain Ramirez was waiting along with a tall, imposing man with gray hair, wearing an impeccable suit that clearly cost more than her monthly salary. Tyler Harrington had the bearing and presence of someone accustomed to commanding rooms and closing multi-million-dollar deals. With a handshake, "Lieutenant Anderson, please come in," said Captain Ramirez, indicating a chair. "This is Mr. Tyler Harrington, CEO of Harrington Technology. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." "Lieutenant," said Harrington, extending his hand with a smile that seemed genuinely warm. "Although circumstances could be better." Rebecca shook his hand firmly. "The pleasure is all mine, sir." "Lieutenant, Mr. Harrington came personally to discuss yesterday's incident," Ramirez explained. Harrington nodded, his face taking on a serious expression. "First of all, I want to deeply apologize for my son's behavior. Connor has always been ... defiant. I lost his mother when he was 12, and unfortunately, I compensated for my absence as a father with money and privileges instead of discipline and values." Rebecca maintained a neutral and professional expression. "There's no need to apologize for actions that weren't yours, sir." "Yes, Lieutenant. As a father, I am responsible. And, as CEO of a company that prides itself on its partnership with the American Armed Forces, I feel doubly ashamed." He paused. "I saw the video this morning. The way you handled the situation was ... extraordinary. Many would have lost their composure, especially considering Connor's aggressive behavior. I was simply following my trainings. In the Navy, we learn to remain calm under pressure and to resolve conflicts with the minimum force necessary." Harrington smiled. Modest, too. "Impressive." He leaned forward. "Lieutenant Anderson, I came here for 2 reasons. First, to apologize personally. Second, to inform you that Connor will not only formally apologize to the sailor he harassed, but has also volunteered to do community service in the Veterans Ward of the San Diego Naval Hospital for 3 months. Rebecca couldn't completely hide her surprise. "That's very generous of him. Actually, it was his idea," Harrington replied, a glint of paternal pride in his eyes. "It seems your confrontation with him had a profound impact. When I arrived in San Diego this morning and confronted him about the video, I expected the usual denial or empty excuses. Instead, he seemed ... changed. Ashamed, certainly, but also thoughtful in a way I hadn't seen him in years." Captain Ramirez, who had been observing silently, interjected. "Mr. Harrington also expressed interest in expanding his company's partnership with our technical training programs for sailors." Harrington nodded. "Exactly. We have cutting-edge technology that could greatly benefit the training of the next generations of naval engineers. And, to be frank, after seeing how officers like Lieutenant Anderson represent the modern Navy, I'm even more convinced that it's a worthwhile investment." The meeting continued for a few more minutes, with discussions about the details of the possible expanded partnership. At the end, as they were saying goodbye, Harrington held Rebecca's hand a little longer. "The necessary, Lieutenant Anderson. I rarely meet people who truly impress me. You are one of them. If you ever decide to leave the Navy, there's a place for you at Harrington Technologies. Someone with your intelligence, composure, and leadership would be a valuable asset to any organization. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Harrington, but my place is here. The Navy is more than a career to me. It's a calling." He smiled, understanding. "I understand perfectly. It's that dedication that makes you soldiers something special. But my offer remains open, indefinitely." After Harrington left, Captain Ramirez looked at Rebecca with an approving expression. "Well, Lieutenant, it seems you not only averted a potentially explosive incident, but also strengthened an important partnership for the Navy. Admiral Thompson will be pleased to hear about it. I only did what any officer would do, sir. Ramirez smiled. Perhaps, but not everyone would do it with the same grace and effectiveness. He paused. You know, Anderson, I'm considering recommending you for the Advanced Engineering Program in Annapolis next cycle. With your practical experience and balanced temperament, you would be an excellent instructor for the cadets. It would be an honor, Captain. Thank you for your trust. In the following weeks, Rebecca's life gradually returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after becoming a sort of minor celebrity within the San Diego naval community. The video continued to circulate, generating discussions about female leadership in the armed forces and how to handle civil-military conflicts. Connor Harrington truly kept his promise to volunteer at the Naval Hospital, and Rebecca would occasionally run into him in the base corridors when he came in for his duty. The transformation in the young man was remarkable, his former arrogance replaced by cautious humility and a genuine desire to learn. In one of these encounters, he approached her hesitantly. "Lieutenant Anderson, may I speak with you for a moment?" Rebecca nodded, observing the young man who now seemed smaller without his intimidating posture. "I just wanted to say, well, thank you. What you did that day at the restaurant, dot 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 dot. He ran a hand through his hair, visibly uncomfortable. "All my life I've used my father's nuns and money as a shield, thinking that made me special, or above the rules. Respect through your own actions and character made me realize how pathetic I was." Rebecca studied him for a moment, seeing sincerity in his eyes. "I don't think you're pathetic, Mr. Harrington. Just someone who's made a few wrong decisions, like we all have. The important thing is to recognize that and change course. That's exactly what I'm trying to." He smiled shyly. "You know, I enrolled for the next semester at college. I'm going to study engineering, like my father originally wanted, but this time I'm doing it for myself, not to please him or to prove anything." "That's excellent. Engineering is a rewarding field. That's what I've discovered working here. The technicians have been teaching me some basic things, and it's fascinating." He hesitated. "Actually, I'm thinking about enlisting after college. The officer program seems meaningful." Rebecca smiled genuinely. "It's extremely meaningful. Difficult, demanding, but incredibly rewarding." "How did you know? That's what you wanted to do? To be a Navy officer, I mean." The question caught Rebecca off guard, making her reflect for a moment. "My father was a Navy officer. He died in service when I was a child. I grew up hearing stories about him, not just about his courage, but about how he led his men, how he cared for them." She rarely shared this personal story, but something in the young man's sincerity continued. "When I was 16, I found a group of letters he had written to my mother during his last deployment. In one of them, he said that the true purpose of life was to serve something greater than oneself. Those words have never left me." Connor nodded thoughtfully. "Serving something greater than yourself, that makes sense. It's the opposite of how I've lived my whole life up until now. It's never too late to change. Mr. Harrington." "Connor, please. And thank you again, Lieutenant Anderson, for everything." As she watched him walk away, Rebecca felt a profound satisfaction that went beyond professional pride. Perhaps her small act of firmness and dignity that day at the restaurant had changed a life for the better. And perhaps that was the true essence of leadership, not just following orders or protocols, but inspiring positive change in the people around you. That night, sitting on her balcony gazing at the city lights reflected in the bay, Rebecca thought of her father, her mother, and the journey that had brought her there. She thought of the young Sailor Martinez, of Connor Harrington, and of all the lives that intertwined with hers through her service. The Navy had given him purpose, structure, and an extended family of brothers and sisters in uniform. It had taught him the value of discipline, perseverance, and integrity. But perhaps the most important lesson he had learned was that true strength came not from rank or positions of power, but from the ability to stand firm in one's values, even or especially when challenged. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her mother, calling for their usual evening chat. "Hi, Mom," Rebecca answered, smiling when she heard the familiar voice on the other end. "Becky! You won't believe it, but I saw you on television today. On the national news." Eleanor's voice overflowed with pride. "My daughter standing up to that arrogant boy like a true leader. Your father would be so proud." Rebecca laughed softly. "So the video made it all the way to Maine? I was hoping it would have gone unnoticed there. Honey, you're an internet sensation. People are calling you an example of quiet leadership and understated female empowerment." "Mom, I was just doing my job, and that's exactly why people are so impressed," Eleanor replied. "In a world where everyone shouts and shows off to get attention, you've shown that true authority doesn't need a spectacle. It's like your father always said, still waters, but deep." The words touched Rebecca deeply. It was a saying her father used to repeat, and one she had incorporated as a personal mantra over the years. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot." The conversation continued, with Eleanor recounting the latest news from the small town and Rebecca sharing details about her encounter with Tyler Harrington and Connor's subsequent transformation. "See, you not only defended your sailor, but you also helped that young man find a better path." Eleanor, sometimes a single moment of firmness with compassion change everything for someone. After hanging up, Rebecca remained on the balcony for a while longer, reflecting on her mother's word. Perhaps that was what attracted her so much to the Navy, the possibility of making a difference, one person at a time, one day at a time, through small acts of leadership and integrity. On the horizon, the lights of an aircraft carrier returning to base twinkled like moving stars, a constant reminder of the larger world to which she belonged and served. Rebecca smiled, feeling at peace with herself and her place in the world. The lieutenant who had confronted an arrogant young man with nothing but calm and dignity was no different from any other dedicated officer serving her country. But perhaps, just perhaps, her small act of quiet courage had inspired others to find that same strength within themselves. And in the end, wasn't that what it truly meant to serve? To be a beacon for others? Showing the way not through grand pronouncements but through consistent actions and unwavering principles? Rebecca stood up, preparing for another day of work tomorrow. Whatever challenge came, she would be ready. Steadfast like the sea, and unwavering like the naval tradition that it proudly carried on its shoulders.